Hello. Hello, hello, hello. 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 Hi. This is Cider. We're going to do a 3-part little series on ways to make your Mythic Plus adventures easier. Focusing on improving your inputs and recognition of things going on in your environment. The 3 things that we're going to go over are button mapping, UI, and your weak auras. The first of which will be our button mapping. So what we've done is remove all the buttons from this character. Actually, we've done it from all of our characters with the goal of making our experience far more consistent, predictable, and manageable. So we want to cover 3 sort of subtopics in this. First thing is, for those of you like me that have multiple characters, the most important thing is consistency. So what we're going to do is find a consistent place and a consistent theory for placement. So for all characters, I happen to have my ratio on what is my mouse 6. It's not actually my 6, but my mouse 6. My cloak will always go on, what is for my keyword, B. My taunt will always be on, where's my taunt? T. My interrupt will always be on 1. And my potion will always be on, what is my mouse 4? Now, the reason this is important is because these are generally, these consistent things are normally important. That's the reason that they're spread out between characters. Either your potion, your taunt, your interrupts. Those are all like things that will be consistent and important between all your characters. So you need to give them priority and good usage, like a good usage spot, so that they're accessible. Now, unfortunately, that's basically the extent of what is purely consistent among all characters. We now start going into what is consistent mostly. So for me, we have something like Battle Shout. Now, Battle Shout is something that we can put consistent across characters because this idea of a buff is utilized between many characters. Like my mage and my warrior both have a buff. Now, where should you put this? Where should you put this button? Now, this is the real question. Where do we put this button? And there's a lot of, like, you could put it anywhere, right? It's your decision. But what is the right place to put it? One way that we're going to try to solve that is through using numbers. So what I've done is I went to Warcraft logs and I picked up a usage spreadsheet of different abilities for warriors so that we could tailor out how many times you're casting something to help determine where it should go. So in this particular example, you can see Battle Shout is cast 7 times. So you might say something like, well, you cast it 7 times. That's more important than something like Stormbolt, right? Because in this particular example, was only cast 4 times. But that's not really true, right? It's not more important. But what isn't important about it? It's context. So there's 2 things we need to use: our data to determine priority, and then our minds to determine context or the logic. So the way we're going to do it is we're going to have a separate bar down here, which is not key bound to any of our keyboard functions. We're actually going to have all this stuff unkeyboard bound. And what this bar down here is going to do is abilities that we must use during Mythic Plus and raiding, which do not impact our battles. They only impact either wipe recovery, initialization of the key, or the start of the key, and those types of behaviors. So we're actually going to go left to right on this. Right to left. So we're going to do our buffs first. What else do we do that's consistent among characters? We do food. So buff food. There's some other stuff here that's important though, right? That's consistent among characters. Flask. But you don't flask all the way at the beginning, right? You flask once. So we're going to place that at the end. I think I have to take off my... 1 second. We have to take off our overlay. So I'm placing that here. Now, this will slowly start to make more sense, but there's more items. So our combat res, our invisibility potion, and our drums all fall into this. Now, I don't recommend clicking a lot of these other items, these ones that you will use in combat or in the fray from this thing, but I like to have them as trackers here. So often I shouldn't be clicking from this position for these things, especially during combat. What I use in combat is OPI. And we'll go into that when we get into our UI discussion. But this would be a fine place. I do spacing here because if there's an off chance, for whatever reason, I do need to click them, I want there to be safety in that I can't click to the two sides, right? So if we are going to put something in a click position, we want it to be very safe and un-error prone. Like, misclicking drums could be hazardous to your very hazardous to the success of your key. So we place those things. Next, there's other things that are consistent among characters that we still haven't placed yet. Things like our hearths. I like to put these up on my screen, but not at a place that's immediately accessible in terms of like visual or clicking cues. So I do like to have them there, but I don't always click them, kind of thing. You can see that it's these buttons happen to be hidden to a degree, so I put them off to the side. Most people won't even notice that they're there when watching the stream. So what we've covered so far is buttons that are completely consistent. Racials, potions, interrupts, taunts for most classes, cloak, buffs, food, flasks, your lust or blood free, lust or heroism, invisibility potions, battle reses where applicable, teleports and similar activities for those of you like me, your transmog. One thing that I also like to add is a keybind for my mouse, a consistent keybind for my mounts, not mouse, mounts. The reason this is important is because there's actually a lot of times when it's important to mount up fast in dungeons. So it's just good to have that keybind available and for it to always be the same thing without having to click or find it. You can decide for yourself how you want to deal with that one for certain. Some people prefer to do OPI. They don't like to give it a priority keyboard button. I think it's important enough to, especially in dungeons like Underrot, where you'll be mounting much more often. So we've done our buffs, we've done our wipe, our consistent recovery, our teleports, hearths, and mounts, both transmog and combat or activity-based mount, racials, buttons, potions, all of this. Now, there are more things that are consistent between characters, but that may not be as immediately clear. Most classes have some type of defensive, like their major mitigation. This could be Turtle for Hunters. This could be Ice Block. This could be, was it Frenzied Regeneration or something for Fury? But for Prot, as a warrior, you tend to have a couple of tanks have access to more cooldown, so I have to make a decision on what I consider to be the most major. And I think that's either between Last Stand or Shield Wall. And I think we just go with Shield Wall because of the cooldown. I think there's an argument to be made for either, because Shield Wall is a 40% mitigation, where Last Stand is a 30% heal plus 100% block. So I think there's an argument to say which one's more important. But we're also going to give that a consistent button between all characters. Now, beyond that, there are other things that are consistent. For example, your primary movement. What is the primary way that you move in situations? So again, for warriors, we actually have two. We have Intercept and Heroic Leap. I will consider Heroic Leap to be the primary, because it's the most flexible, although it is more likely that you're using Intercept more commonly. The secondary reason why I put Intercept not necessarily as a movement exclusively is because in some situations it isn't always a movement. It could be a defensive, where if you're using Safeguard. So I place it as a, because it's not exclusively a movement, I'm making it the secondary. So we have our movements, our potion, our defensive, our racial, our setups, and we're starting to look like a class. We're starting to look like a class that makes more sense. We're starting to fill out the buttons. So from here, we're starting to hit the point where we're going to hit the core of our class. If you look, there's almost no buttons here that really fall that aren't part of core mechanics. There's a couple of defensive here that aren't, some things that don't quite fall into all the same families. So how do we decide these things? So we go back to our numbers and we start trying to think about what are the most important things. What are your most important casts? And our four most important casts are, first, the most important being Thunderclap. That's the button that will be hit the most. This is going to be the most often hit button in the dungeon. So it needs to be the most accessible. So I put that on, for me, that's Q. It's the button I'm going to hit the most out of the dungeon. The second most hit button will be Shield Slam. Our third will be Ignore Pain. And our fourth will be Revenge. Now, this is going to sound pretty insane, But with this alone, what we've set up here, you can actually get pretty far. It actually might be a fun test to just show. Like, this is a lot of the base of what you're doing. If you can do this stuff right, you're going to get pretty far. Like, you have your movement, a defensive, this stuff. This is pretty good. But of course, there's more stuff we have to put down. So, what is that stuff? We gotta do that priority meets logic thing. So I think our the biggest things are, where does Devastate, Avatar, Last End, where did these things go? And Shield Block, sorry. And Shield Block. So we're going to return to like the air of consistency. So not only are we going to be consistent among our characters, but we're going to try to be consistent within our characters. So we're going to try to relate things together. So example is Shield Block not only buffs Shield Slam, but also is a defensive that goes along the same vein. So I'm going to keep it nearby. Demoralizing Shout is in the same is tied to I have a trait which is Deafening Clash, which connects these two. Avatar, we're gonna place. We would love to put it in the same vein. We would like it. It wants to share the same spot. We'll put it near. Actually, we could put it here because it also triggers Ignore Pain. Yeah. Devastate because it's an offensive ability that can also proc. Devastate can proc a charge of Shield Slam. So you can put it there. Yeah. It's a lot of our core mechanics. These are, I think we hit every button that's going to be hit often in your dungeons. This is the 90% of the keys that you will be hitting. I don't think we've actually missed anything. Now we're getting to the exceptions. What do we hit in exception cases? So, Last Stand. Last Stand and Commanding Shout, Rallying Cry are not the same priority. You'll hit Last Stand far more often than you hit Rallying Cry because of the reduced like it's not actually a 2-minute cooldown, it's a reduced 2-minute cooldown. So unfortunately that doesn't fit perfectly in our little metric. Same thing with Shockwave and Stormbolt, but we'll keep our stuns together. Spell Reflect. Victory Rush. And we just have 2 buttons left. Berserker's Rage and Intimidating Shout. Oh, and Heroic Throw. What? And we put those on our least common buttons. Because there's chances some dungeons we might not even hit that. It's probably not true. We'll probably hit Intimidating Shout almost every dungeon because it's a backup interrupt. But this is the way that we're going to set up our buttons. To sort of summarize it, we made consistency across all of our characters in terms of our racial button, potion, movement, mount, dungeon preparation, dungeon exceptions, and other consumables, our world movement based items. We made our core class mechanics within the same main button string, where your hand is resting. And we made the rest of the kit as closely tied to similarities so that there isn't that you have an opportunity to learn and improve from what you have. Now at this point, it's going to be execution and learning. Unfortunately, it'll be an exercise to move to this new paradigm. What I've done is I've done this for all of my characters all at once. And I'm basically going to be doing low keys and training dummy sessions to get back into the swing of it. It's gonna be painful. You're gonna notice a drop in excellence for sure, but that's gonna be just the nature of learning something new. But it'll pay off in the long run with minimizing mistakes. So that's what we're targeting here. How do we make our time? How do we increase our time management and time efficiency, and make ourselves less error prone? And one of the ways we're doing that is through consistent and effective button mapping. Thank you for listening. We do Mythic Pluses over at twitch.tv/Cider the Great. We do tutoring both for Mythic Pluses and for other World of Warcraft character improvements there. Tune in. Thank you very much. Oh.